Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. The main purpose of this show is to promote a discussion of major international issues such as war and peace, economic and social development, climate change, and human rights that impact people worldwide. New knowledge will inspire, involve, and motivate all of us to better deal with these challenges and to help create a better world. Today's program will focus on a group that's doing a tremendous amount as far as helping people who are refugees and people who are suffering from natural disasters. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to take a look at the Sovereign Order of Malta, an organization that devotes a large part of its resources to helping people who are battling natural disasters, people who are refugees, and many other people who are suffering. My guest today is an expert on the order. My guest today is the Ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations, His Excellency Oscar de Rojas. Ambassador Oscar de Rojas is also a professor of United Nations Studies at Long Island University. Your Excellency, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm so happy to be here.
I appreciate you being with me. Let's start right at the beginning. What is the Sovereign Order of Malta? When was it formed? Why was it formed? What is its basic mission?
Well, the Sovereign Order of Malta has a very, very interesting history. It's over 900 years old. It was actually formed in Jerusalem. They don't know exactly quite the date, but they put it at around the year 1048. And that was just before the First Crusade arrived. And the reason I say this is that many people think that the Order of Malta was part of the Crusades in some way, and it was not. The people who were there helping the poor and the sick, which is the main mission of the Order of Malta, to help particularly the sick poor, those who are poor and also sick at the time, had already set up this hospital in Jerusalem before the First Crusade arrived. Of course, the order is very much linked to the Catholic Church. It is considered a lay order of the Catholic Church. And for that reason, when the Crusades arrived, they obviously tried to help it in any way that they could. And there were many interesting developments, but what it's good just to know for now is that the order traces its history back to, again, over 900 years. It stayed in Jerusalem for almost 2 centuries. It then went to Rhodes for 200 years. It then went to Malta for 300 years, which is from where it derives its name. And then finally, it settled in Rome, where it's headquartered now. So we can talk about any of those things more later on.
It certainly has quite a history to it. Yes. It really does. And of course, our viewers, if they'd like more information, they can go to www.orderofmalta.int and get much more information about what we're talking about today. Now, you are not the permanent representative of Malta. There are 193 countries that are member states of the United Nations, part of the General Assembly. But what exactly is your classification as far as being an observer entity, I guess, is that what we would call?
Absolutely.
You and what is the difference between that and the Holy See and Palestine?
Right. The Order of Malta claims sovereignty, which is a very interesting concept. Legal scholars will argue endlessly about that, who has a right to have sovereignty and who doesn't. But we have had sovereignty for a good part of those 900 years because we exchanged ambassadors with the major powers of the world. And today we have diplomatic relations with 104 countries, which is more than half the membership of the United Nations. But of course, the other half, those that do not recognize the Order of Malta as a sovereign entity, would not consider us to be a state in the way that they do consider, for example, the Holy See and Palestine. So when we talk about non-member states of the UN, we're talking about those two, the Holy See and Palestine, because they're not full members, but they are considered states. They are observer states. We come one small notch down from there. We are an observer entity. And there's 3 or 4 others in our same category, observer entities. We were granted that status by a resolution of the General Assembly back in 1994. And we take it very seriously because it does allow us to participate in the work of the UN. We sometimes make statements, we contribute with documents, we contribute with ideas. And the only thing, of course, is that we not only we cannot vote, but we're not considered a state. So it's a very interesting kind of special situation that we have.
It's certainly a special status that you have, without a doubt.
Yes.
Well, now the United Nations. Well, you're focusing on humanitarian issues primarily,
Yes.
and of course the United Nations. A large part of the UN focuses on humanitarian issues. Probably close to 80% of the United Nations, in some way, shape, or form, is involved in this. We think back to late 2015, September 2015. The UN General Assembly adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, which became the Development Agenda of 2030. Which are really 17 logical, practical, quantifiable goals to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to promote women's equality, sustainable development, a variety of things. How important are those 17 goals? Maybe not all 17, but are there certain ones of those 17 goals that are more important to you as you look at your programs, which we'll get into in just a moment? But how do you view the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, we definitely were very happy about the whole process leading up to the adoption of the 2030 Agenda and of the 17 SDGs. And as you said earlier, it's very difficult to find any of those 17 SDGs that is not linked in one way or another with the basic mission of making lives better for people, particularly those who are more disadvantaged. So I guess that you could say that it's hard to find one of those SDGs that we don't like or that we don't fully ascribe to. Perhaps the ones that would be a little bit more kind of out of our agenda would be those dealing with environmental issues. We're not so concerned into that. Not that we don't think it's important, it's just that you have to sort of focus what you do, and our focus is more on helping people directly. And of course, all of these development goals are linked with humanitarian issues, because sooner or later, I mean, if we do arrive at a world that is more developed, where people have better lives, better incomes, then you won't have perhaps the need, so much need for humanitarian aid.
Why don't we focus on just a few of your goals and maybe offer some concrete examples of projects that you have underway right now to help people in various parts of the world? One of your major goals is to provide aid and assistance to refugees. Yeah. Are these refugees, for example, from war-torn areas, or refugees from natural disaster areas, or a combination of both, and even more?
I would say a combination of both. But now, because of the way things are, particularly the situation arising out of the conflicts in the Middle East and also in Africa, we have been quite active in trying to be as much help as possible with the question of the refugees that are migrating. For example, trying to cross the Mediterranean from either the Middle East or Africa into Europe, and also those that are migrating within Africa itself from one country to another. And you can say the same about the Middle East, because there's an internal migration taking place there too. What we do in concrete terms is, for example, we have partnered with the Italian Navy and with the Greek Navy, and they have allowed now the orders medics and orders nurses and orders volunteers to be on the boats, those rescue boats that go out there basically day and night, trying to find some of these poor people that come on those, very rickety boats, and sometimes they sink or capsize. And we help in the rescue operations, and then we also provide first aid. When those who are rescued, we try to provide first aid, basic things. And then we have on the points of arrival on the mainland, in Greece and in parts of Italy, and even further up into Europe, into some of the countries of passage, as they call them, or transition. We have stations where we also provide not only medical aid, which is kind of our big thing, but also even in some cases, even legal counsel to some of the refugees. I mean, how easy or difficult it may be in a country X to get a permit to stay as compared to country Y. So we try to provide that kind of help and social work trying to find, put together families who have been separated in the middle of the chaos. So it's very active, the order, in the whole area of this terrible thing that's happening now with the refugees in the Middle East.
You mentioned that you're in 104 countries, I believe, if I recall that figure correctly, and there are a lot of countries that don't have diplomatic relations with 104 countries. I'm sure there's some out there. You have really a large network as you're describing this. Do you have a ballpark figure of how many employees you have roughly? You say the operation is funded primarily by the Catholic Church, the Holy See, but do you have an idea of how many employees around the world, or people, or maybe even volunteers working with you too?
Well, it's mostly volunteers.
Mostly
actually.
volunteers.
And it's mostly the actual members of the association, of the order. We have 13,500 knights and dames, as we call them. Members of the order all over the world. Of that figure, approximately about 2,500 are in the United States alone, and the rest are scattered over other parts, Europe, South America, even now Asia in some parts. And those members of the order, whether men, which would be the knights, or women, who would be the dames, are committed to give part of their time to help out with some of these things. Now, so we are all basically volunteers. Now, in addition to that, the order does have, it really does not receive any direct money from the Catholic Church. We have our own sources of income, not very much, but we have our own sources. The members pay dues. We pay dues annually, which are used for some of these activities. And then also we get help from foundations, private foundations, in some cases from governments. Which recognize the importance of the Order of Malta, and they give grants for us to work. So with that money, we're able to actually hire professionals who then go out. When I was saying before that we have medics and nurses on some of these boats, many of them are actually hired people that the order hires to do this job for them. So you have a mixture of the volunteers plus the hired hands. So if you sum all of that together, you probably come up with a figure of about 50,000 people that work.
50,000,
something like that.
That's a very large number. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's watching this program and they have an interest in this, can anyone join, or do you have to meet certain criteria or something like that, or can you become a member?
Yes, you can become a member. The order is very decentralized. It's not something like a pyramidal. Each country has what is called an association. So here in the United States, because there are so many members, there's actually 3 associations. 2 in the East, one called the American, based in New York, one called the Federal, based in Washington, and then in the West Coast we have the Western, based in San Francisco. If you live in any of those places and then you are interested in joining the order, that would be the way to do it. Now, you can't just fill out an application and then tomorrow you become a member of the order. Theoretically, you have to be sort of asked to join by somebody who already knows your character, that you really would be good and that you really would devote your time and your energies to help. But you can approach people, if you're interested in the order, that they're so-and-so is a member, and you can make your interest known, and I'm sure that sooner or later they will ask you in. So that's the way the process works. But again, it's always through the national associations, because the whole concept of that is that the national association would know the character of the person, because that is very important. We just don't want people who are not going to do anything for the order. So they're not going to know that in Rome, in the headquarters. I mean, they rely a lot on the opinion of those who know the person from where they live, from where they're from.
Now, your second goal is disaster relief and prevention, really a 2-part goal, I guess we could say. Let's talk about the first part, disaster relief. What type of assistance do you provide, and what are 1 or 2 of the areas of the world where you're operating to provide this assistance?
Well, just about anywhere where anything like that happens. We have a special sort of arm of the Order of Malta, which is called Malteser International. It's based in Cologne in Germany, Malteser International. And they are the relief arm. So let's say a tsunami hits, like it did, a few years ago in Indonesia and in parts of Asia. Malteser would be immediately mobilized to go there and try to help in all we can. And so what we try to do, we try to fundraise, we try to go to every possible source to get donations of supplies, medicines, food, clothing, anything that's needed, and then we go and provide it, like indeed many others do. But one thing we can say about the Order of Malta is that we have a tradition of not just leaving the next day. We sort of stay, we hang around. So when a big disaster like a tsunami or a hurricane or an earthquake hits, we just don't go and deliver the food and the blankets and then we're out the next day. We sort of stay around and we try to help as much we can in the whole effort of reconstruction and helping the people rebuild their lives. So that's something we pride ourselves very much on doing.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately financed, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections Television are solely those of the moderator and his guests. Our viewers are invited to check out the website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous shows. If you're interested in distributing our shows through PBS, Community Access Television, educational institutions, a website, or any other media outlets, please go to our website for more information. Global Connections Television is provided as a public service at no cost. Today we're looking at the Sovereign Order of Malta at the United Nations and some of the humanitarian assistance it's providing to literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world. My guest today is an expert on this order. My guest today is the Ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta to the United Nations, His Excellency Oscar de Rojas. Mr. Ambassador, we're talking about the Sovereign Order of Malta. We were talking about disaster relief. The second part of that goal is to look at prevention. What are you doing in that area as far as trying to identify natural disasters before they happen and to prepare for them? Because inevitably there will be natural disasters. We can't escape that, but being prepared certainly can help really alleviate some of the pain and suffering when that disaster strikes.
Yes. Well, we have a network of existing hospitals and clinics that the Order runs in many parts of the world, particularly in Africa, in impoverished countries of Africa, that are really ongoing projects. I mean, if a disaster were to strike, obviously that's a very important resource to have in place. But even if a disaster does not strike, the fact that there are so many poor people who have the tendency to become sick for many reasons, not good drinking water, things of that sort, we have these clinics and these hospitals that in many cases offer services that are normally not accessible to the population. So that's another thing we pride ourselves on, the fact that we have this network. One good example that always comes to mind is the Holy Family Hospital in Bethlehem. We have a hospital that is considered a model in Bethlehem. I don't know if you were going to ask me for an example, but maybe
always an example. Okay. Yes.
In Bethlehem, in the part of the West Bank where Bethlehem is, we have a hospital, maternity hospital. It's only dedicated to maternity, help women give birth, and we take women there of all religions, of all nationalities, no regard. They don't even get asked, are you Jewish, are you Muslim, are you Christian? And we let them have their babies in a safe, modern, really state-of-the-art environment at no cost. When they leave with their babies, they're asked, would you like to contribute something to the operation of the hospital? Some of them might contribute $5, $10, whatever is within their means, but they don't have to pay anything. So there's nothing like that for many miles around, and everybody that we talk to who has experienced the work of that hospital is extremely thankful that there is this resource. And I could give you many others. There's one hospital in the north part of Haiti that is in a very isolated part of Haiti that you remember the cholera epidemic. When the cholera epidemic broke out a few years ago, we were really the best medical facility around for many areas. And although, of course, many people did catch the disease and die, we were able to help to save many lives because of that facility, which again, like the one in Bethlehem, is really very modern in the middle of a very impoverished part of the country. So those are very good two examples of a continuing operation.
Exactly. That leads right into goal number 3, diseases and epidemics. And you mentioned cholera. We've seen the Ebola outbreak. We talk about Zika virus. There are all AIDS. We're dealing with a lot of challenges. What are some of the other issues that you're dealing with in this particular area? You mentioned cholera, but are there some others that you're involved in?
HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS. In several of our places, we have particularly trying to establish ways and means to make sure that, for example, mothers who may have the virus do not transmit it to their babies, neither in the time of gestation nor even at the moment of birth, because that's probably the most dangerous moment, when a mother can pass on the HIV virus to the baby at the moment of birth. But there are ways to prevent it. There are techniques to prevent it. So we're helping out with that, and so that would be another big one for us. And believe it or not, something that many people have forgotten about, but the order, because it's so old, it started dealing with long time ago, is leprosy. Leprosy. We have some of the few remaining leprosy hospitals in the world, because there's still leprosy around, but not too many people want to even hear about it, and we have some specialized places to take care of people with leprosy, again in Africa mainly, and in other places, and this dates back for many centuries, this tradition of.
Are we being successful as far as reducing the number of people who have leprosy? As you mentioned, but we don't hear much about it anymore, for many reasons, but are we actually conquering that?
We're trying to do the best possible. I mean, I don't know about conquering it, eradicating it. That will probably still take some time, but we definitely are those who have the possibility to sort of be treated by our resources. I think that have a better chance to being healed, and perhaps not passing it on to other people. So I think that again we're doing what we can.
And that's what we have to do.
That's
All of
right.
us have a role to play. We have to do what we can do.
That's right.
And no matter how small, how large it may be, but we need to do it. Another goal you have, it's really a fascinating one, is social assistance. What exactly do you mean by social assistance, and what are one or two examples of projects in this particular area?
Well, social assistance, I think I was mentioning earlier, in the case of the refugees in Europe, when they arrive, those who do make it to the coast of Europe, they not only require food and health care and clothing, they require help in just knowing what are they going to do with their new lives, integrating into this new strange world that they're coming into. And so we consider that part of a social assistance kind of work in terms of counseling, trying to make sure people understand what it is that they're getting in themselves into, because it's not easy, as you know, to suddenly change it into a totally different cultural environment. So I was talking about the legal advice. We starting with that. It's just starts with something so elementary as that, making sure that you're going to have the right papers so that nobody can then think that you do not belong there or should be sent back. But then also about schooling, about norms, things of that sort. So again, we partner with the local authorities of the countries in trying to provide that kind of social assistance. And in more perhaps general terms, human beings require simple, solidarity and affection. I mean, you can't just give them a plate of food or put a shot and get rid of some infection they may have. They need a little pat on the back too, a little hug, and just to make them feel, I feel with you, I know what you're going through, I want to see in everything we can help. And that's what we also mean by social assistance, providing that extra care, which is really the human touch. And that's why I said that we stay around after a natural disaster. We just don't take the first plane back out. We stay around to try to sort of help in that process, and we think that that's very important, because we all need that.
You're very involved with a lot of UN agencies, a lot of other countries, non-governmental organizations. Let's shift gears just for a moment. We're at the United Nations doing this show. You're a scholar, a professor. You teach a course on the United Nations at Long Island University. Hardest question yet in the final minute and a half that we have. As an expert on the United Nations, you worked for the UN for several years with the Department for Economic and Social Affairs.
Yes.
As you look at the UN, we hear a lot of talk about reforming the United Nations. Do you have one or two suggestions on what the UN can do as it goes into through 2016 and 2017 to be a more effective and a more efficient organization?
You know, actually, that's the question that I always put in the final exam for my students.
So we'll have to take a test.
Because I always tell them, you know, after all you've learned, what would you say are the most important challenges for the UN? And you get very interesting replies, but students are very intelligent, and they know a lot more than sometimes we think they know. And they come back with more or less always the same kind of replies. Number one, they think that the Security Council, since I'm really not supposed to talk too much about these issues, I'm talking about my students, but you can see that I sort of identify with them. The Security Council, you know, most of them say, why is it that the Security Council is run by just a few countries? And how did that come to be? And wasn't that something that was good for 1945, but it should not be anymore? How can we change that? So that's a question many people ask themselves in order for this place to be more democratic, as we would all like it to be. Another thing, if I could just name three things, is the question of the Secretary General. You know, the Secretary General sometimes is accused of being too much of a secretary and not much of a general, but some countries supposedly hold the view that he should not be a general, but rather a secretary. So there are those two conflicting approaches. Should be strong, or should he just be weak? And many people feel that one of the things that sort of ties his hands is the fact that he has to be reelected. You know, or most of them want to be reelected for a second term. So he spends a lot of energy in trying to more or less, and some people say maybe he should just be elected for a one-year term, and then he'll let him do his thing, for better or for worse.
Exactly.
And
those are some very interesting proposals, and some that we'll have to pursue in the future. We're just about out of time. But Ambassador Oscar de Rojas, I want to thank you so very much for being with me today, and thank you for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. My pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Please join us again for the next episode of Global Connections Television. I'm Bill Miller. Thanks for watching.